What if I told you the most ambitious Formula One project of the modern era isn't being talked about on purpose? Not because it's small, but because revealing it too early would expose just how extreme the plan really is. Behind closed doors, there are leaked indications that Aston Martin's 2026 project goes far beyond a new car. It's a full reset of power, people, and control built to succeed only if everything clicks at the same time. And that kind of alignment almost never happens in F1. Rivals are already whispering that if this project works, it won't just surprise the grid. It will force teams to question whether they ever understood how serious Aston Martin's intentions really were. And the most intriguing part is this. The detail that explains why Aston Martin has taken such an enormous risk doesn't appear at the beginning of the story. It only makes sense once you follow every piece all the way to the end. What makes this Aston Martin project so unsettling for the rest of the grid is not any single component. It's the fact that nothing about it looks improvised. From the outside, teams often look ambitious right before they fail. They hire big names. They announce partnerships. They promise timelines. Aston Martin did the opposite. They built first, spoke later, and accepted years of underperformance without trying to distract anyone from it. That behavior alone signals intent at a level most teams never reach. The foundation of this project wasn't a car. It was infrastructure. Before Aston Martin talked seriously about winning, Lawrence Stroll spent years and billions creating a factory designed to remove excuses. A new wind tunnel. A new simulator. A campus built to operate as a works team, not a customer operation borrowing tools from rivals. This matters because infrastructure doesn't create lap time instantly. It creates belief internally that the ceiling has finally been lifted. And once a team believes that, its decisions change permanently. Then came the most symbolic hire of all. Adrian Newey. Not as a consultant. Not as a figurehead. But as the central mind behind a clean sheet car, working with no legacy constraints and no short-term distractions. People inside the team describe a level of focus that borders on obsession. Newey isn't fixing problems from previous seasons. He's designing a car for a rulebook that resets everything he cares about most. Aerodynamics. Packaging. Energy flow. This is exactly the environment where his influence has historically been most dangerous. But even that doesn't fully explain the scale of the gamble. Because Aston Martin didn't just pair Newey with resources. They paired him with a works engine partnership. Honda. A manufacturer that walked away from Formula One only to return when the sport aligned perfectly with its road car future. The 2026 regulations shift half the performance burden to electrification, battery management, energy recovery, hybrid integration. This isn't just racing technology for Honda. It's corporate strategy. And that changes how much risk they're willing to tolerate. What leaked information suggests is that this engine program has not been smooth. Honda executives have admitted publicly that development has been difficult, that the challenges are deeper than anticipated. And paradoxically, that may be the most revealing detail of all. Because teams that are truly pushing boundaries rarely have clean development stories. Struggle usually means you're somewhere new. The danger isn't difficulty. The danger is comfort. Timing adds another layer of intrigue. Aston Martin has chosen to reveal its 2026 car later than almost everyone else. After private testing. After initial data is gathered. Before the public comparisons begin. That suggests a team that wants understanding before exposure. They are not chasing hype. They are managing risk. And in Formula One, teams that control when they speak often control how they're perceived. All of this feeds into a single unresolved question that no one can answer yet. What happens when all these elements finally meet reality at the same time? A clean sheet Newey design. A brand new wind tunnel still proving its correlation. A works Honda engine under unprecedented electrical demands. Two drivers at completely different career stages. This project doesn't allow for partial success. It either validates everything Lawrence Stroll has built, or it exposes how unforgiving Formula One really is. And that's why the paddock is watching Aston Martin differently now. Not with excitement. With caution. Because this isn't a normal rebuild. It's an all-in move that only makes sense if the people behind it believe the payoff changes their position in the sport permanently. Whether that belief is justified is still unknown. But the scale of the risk ensures one thing. When the truth finally emerges, it won't be subtle. As this project moves closer to reality, another layer of complexity begins to worry people inside the paddock. Aston Martin isn't just trying to be fast. They're trying to change what kind of team they are perceived to be. For decades, every incarnation of this outfit survived by being clever, efficient, and opportunistic. This time, survival isn't the goal. Control is. And when a team shifts from opportunism to control, expectations stop being flexible. They become absolute. One of the most revealing aspects of the project is how much of it depends on elements that cannot be rushed or patched. The new wind tunnel is not just a tool, it's a statement. For the first time in its history, Aston Martin isn't borrowing time or sharing limitations. But new tunnels come with a hidden cost: correlation. Until data from CFD, tunnel, and track align perfectly, every design decision carries doubt. That uncertainty is dangerous under normal circumstances. Under a clean sheet regulation reset, it can define an entire era if misjudged early. This is where Adrian Newey's role becomes almost existential. He isn't just designing a car. He's acting as the human filter between ambition and reality. Newey's career is built on sensing when data lies, when tools mislead, and when physics quietly disagrees with simulation. That intuition is impossible to quantify. And it's also impossible to replace. Aston Martin's gamble assumes that Newey can neutralize risks that would overwhelm most organizations. That's a massive assumption, even given his history. At the same time, the Honda partnership introduces a completely different kind of pressure. This isn't a customer engine. This is a works relationship where success and failure are shared publicly. Honda didn't return to Formula One to finish fourth. They returned because 2026 aligns with their corporate identity: electrification, sustainability, technical relevance. That alignment means patience exists, but only up to a point. If the power unit struggles, there is no convenient scapegoat. The responsibility is mutual. The leaked admissions from Honda leadership about development struggles have only intensified scrutiny. Not because problems exist. Problems always exist. But because the margin for error is smaller than ever. With a 50-50 power split between combustion and electric systems, weaknesses can't be hidden. Aerodynamics can't compensate for missing kilowatts the way they once could. Newey himself has hinted at this reality, which makes the engine question the most fragile pillar of the entire project. Then there are the drivers. Fernando Alonso represents urgency, time, legacy. This could be his final real chance to fight at the front. That creates focus, but also pressure. Lance Stroll represents continuity and ownership, but also scrutiny. In a project this ambitious, every performance gap will be magnified. Every missed opportunity will be questioned. Aston Martin didn't just build a car for 2026. They built a spotlight they cannot turn off. And this is what truly separates this project from every previous rebuild Aston Martin has attempted. There is no safe outcome. If it works, it validates Lawrence Stroll's vision and permanently elevates the team's status. If it fails, it won't be dismissed as bad luck or bad timing. It will be seen as proof that even unlimited ambition has limits in Formula One. That's why this project feels so heavy, so final. It isn't just about lap time. It's about whether Aston Martin belongs among the architects of the sport's future, or remains a challenger forever chasing someone else's era. As the scale of this project becomes clearer, another tension starts to surface inside the paddock. Aston Martin hasn't just aligned people and infrastructure. They've aligned timing. And timing in Formula One is often more decisive than raw ability. The 2026 reset arrives at the exact moment when the team's facilities are finally complete, when Newey has full freedom, and when Honda's long-term vision converges with the sport's direction. That kind of alignment is rare. And when it happens, it creates a sense that this isn't an experiment. It's an attempt to seize a very narrow window before it closes again. What unsettles rivals is that Aston Martin appears willing to accept short-term chaos in exchange for long-term clarity. The wind tunnel correlation issues are a perfect example. Most teams would slow down, consolidate, protect reputation. Aston Martin chose to push through, trusting that resolving correlation now is less damaging than discovering fundamental flaws once the regulations are locked. That approach is risky. But it also signals a team that believes discovering the truth early is worth the pain. And teams that prioritize truth over comfort tend to make fewer irreversible mistakes later. There's also a strategic patience in how Aston Martin is allowing the outside world to speculate. They know expectations are rising. They know the narrative is growing louder. But they've resisted the urge to manage it aggressively. No bold claims. No championship talk. No attempts to shape perception before evidence exists. That restraint suggests an internal awareness of how fragile credibility is at this stage. Because once a project like this is judged publicly, there is no reset button. Internally, the pressure is already immense. This isn't a group of people learning together. It's a group of specialists brought together with the assumption that they already know how to win. That creates a different dynamic. There is less tolerance for ambiguity, less patience for misalignment. Every department understands that failure here won't be interpreted as bad luck. It will be interpreted as proof that the grand vision was flawed. That awareness sharpens focus, but it also magnifies stress. What makes this project especially fragile is that its components are interdependent. The car's aerodynamic philosophy depends on power unit behavior. The power unit's deployment strategy depends on cooling and packaging. The packaging depends on infrastructure accuracy. There are no isolated failures here. If one pillar underperforms, the others feel it immediately. That's the price of integration. And Aston Martin has chosen integration deliberately, knowing it removes fallback options. Rivals are watching not for speed, but for coherence. Does the car behave the way its designers expect? Do upgrades make sense within a larger framework? Do the drivers speak with clarity or confusion? These signals appear long before championship battles form. And they tell experienced teams whether a project is fundamentally sound or quietly unstable. Aston Martin knows this. That's why they've treated early running as information gathering, not performance theater. And this is where the story remains deliberately unresolved. Because Aston Martin's most ambitious project ever doesn't need to dominate immediately to justify itself. It only needs to prove that the structure works. That the people can collaborate under pressure. That the tools tell the truth. That the risks taken were intentional, not reckless. If those conditions are met, the rest can be built over time. But if they aren't, no amount of investment or reputation will soften the verdict. Which is why, as 2026 approaches, Aston Martin isn't just unveiling a car. They're exposing the outcome of a gamble years in the making. As the final pieces of this project edge closer to exposure, a deeper anxiety begins to surround Aston Martin's ambitions. This isn't just about whether the AMR26 is quick. It's about whether the team has finally crossed the invisible line between rebuilding and becoming something else entirely. Once you step into that territory, failure is no longer interpreted as part of growth. It's interpreted as proof that the transformation itself was an illusion. And that's the risk Aston Martin has willingly accepted by making this project so comprehensive, so public, and so irreversible. What's striking is how little room this project leaves for gradual success. There is no version of 2026 where Aston Martin quietly finishes 7th and calls it progress. The investment, the hires, the infrastructure, the narrative, everything points toward immediate relevance. That doesn't mean championships are required. But credibility is. They must look like a team that belongs at the front, even if results lag behind. Because in Formula One, perception hardens quickly, and first impressions under a new regulation set tend to last longer than anyone expects. This is where Lawrence Stroll's role becomes impossible to separate from the technical story. Owners usually sit above the chaos. Stroll is embedded in it. His reputation, his business strategy, and his long-term vision are all tied directly to this outcome. That level of personal investment changes decision-making dynamics inside the team. It creates urgency, but also pressure to justify choices that cannot be reversed. And when ownership is this closely linked to performance, internal debates take on a very different tone. There's also a quiet understanding that Aston Martin's project challenges an unspoken hierarchy within Formula One. For decades, success has been concentrated among a small group of teams with deep institutional memory. Aston Martin is trying to buy time. To compress decades of learning into a few intense years. That strategy can work, but only if execution is flawless. And the sport is littered with examples of teams who believed resources alone could replace experience, only to discover how unforgiving that assumption can be. Rivals aren't dismissing Aston Martin anymore. But they aren't celebrating them either. They're watching for signs of strain. For friction between departments. For mismatches between expectation and reality. Because projects of this magnitude rarely fail all at once. They fail subtly. Through small compromises that accumulate until the original vision becomes unrecognizable. Spotting those signs early is how experienced teams gauge whether a new contender is real. The drivers, too, will play a role that goes beyond lap time. Fernando Alonso's feedback will be dissected line by line. Not just for pace, but for belief. Does he sound convinced? Does he sound patient? Does he sound like someone who sees a future unfolding? Because Alonso has lived through enough failed, next big projects, to recognize one early. His reactions will carry weight far beyond the cockpit. And this is where the story refuses to resolve itself. Aston Martin's most ambitious F1 project ever has been built to answer a single question. Can a team manufacture relevance in modern Formula One through vision, investment, and timing alone? The AMR26 will not answer that immediately. It will hint. It will suggest. It will provoke debate. But the true verdict will take time, patience, and a tolerance for uncertainty that Aston Martin has already shown it's willing to embrace. Whether that courage becomes legacy or cautionary tale is the one thing no leak can yet reveal.